Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all well this lovely sunny June afternoon, and a big thank you to those that have joined us on this session today. This webinar is primarily aimed at the asset owners, where we're looking at fire door compliance and how taking a unified approach to your inspections and audits can help reduce risk, streamline operations, and make sure you're always on the right side of safety and compliance. I'm Maria Hudson, CMO at Zutec, and I'll be your moderator for today. I'll start by talking about current state of play with fire safety regulations and some of the key challenges we're seeing asset owners face when it comes to conducting fire door audits and staying compliant. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by David Emuan, Managing Director at Sculptra. As a consultancy, David's team works closely with asset owners and has been instrumental in helping his clients get the right fire door inspection systems and processes in place. David will be talking through tried and tested models and strategies that help businesses procure tools, stay efficient and compliant. David will also cover off some pain points that he hears about and how these can be overcome with the right tools. Thank you, David, for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
It's also great to have my colleague, James Starman, with us today, Zutec's Head of Account Management and Customer Success. James will talk through how to bring together a unified digital approach to fire door audits. He will also share a live demo of the Zutec app in action in the field and show you our dashboard that lets you view all the audits across your properties at a glance, analyze data, review and manage resolution, and support compliance. We're talking through a few of our other solutions that support building information and data management and effectiveness. Please feel free to ask questions during the webinar. We'll do our best to answer them as we go, but we do have a Q&A session at the end. You can submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom right hand of your screen or by dropping them into the chat box, so we'll be checking that regularly. We'll also be running a few polls during the session, and it was great to have your insights, so please do add your answers to the questions, because that really does help us understand your needs and guides us in how we can support our customers better in future. The poll button is also at the bottom of your screen with poll pop-up, and the poll will pop up when we're ready. So please take a moment to vote, and we'll let you know when the time is right. So how did we get to where we are today, and what is the current state of play? If we take a step back to 2005, we have the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order, which is a really key piece of legislation because it was the first time it put the responsibility for fire safety directly in a responsible person's hands to make sure proper risk assessments were in place and all the necessary maintenance was kept up to date. That meant making sure all fire safety components, including fire doors, were up to standard. Then we moved forward to 2021 and the Fire Safety Act. Here, the responsibilities are made much more clearer. It explicitly covers external walls and flat entrance doors, and it really reinforced duty of those responsible to make sure their fire doors are really up to scratch, protecting people the way they should be. The following year, in 2022, we got the Fire Safety England Regulation and Regulation 10. This was a big step forward in fire safety, aligning more with the Building Safety Act and increasing the regularity of checks. From this point, quarterly checks of communal doors became a legal requirement. It also called for an annual inspection of flat entrance doors and proper record keeping in residential buildings over 11 metres tall to avoid failure and reduce risk. That same year, the Building Safety Act came into force, where there has been a huge focus on digital record keeping and a golden thread of information, particularly around fire safety components across high-risk residential buildings. The Hackett Review called for a more modern, reliable approach to safety, so moving away from paper files and disparate spreadsheets towards a unified digital view and a single source of truth that shows you exactly what's in your building, how it works, when it was last inspected, and when it was last maintained. This journey highlights how much more rigorous and sophisticated fire door safety has become, reflecting not just a change in regulations, but a change in attitudes towards safety, maintenance, and record keeping. Now, what I'm going to show you next is really quite powerful, but honestly quite alarming statistic too. So a recent survey by the health and safety training provider, CE Safety, found that a staggering 75% of fire doors in Britain did not meet required safety standards. That's 3 out of 4 doors failing to do their job properly. putting people at greater risk and putting buildings, businesses and lives on the line. We don't know why this is, and it could be for multiple reasons, but we do know this isn't a small problem, but it's an industry-wide challenge and highlights not just a gap in knowledge and compliance, but also a real opportunity for improvement. It underscores exactly why proper maintenance, regular checks and accurate record keeping is crucial, and why a consistent process is necessary to ensure doors are in working order and have reliable evidence to prove it. But that's not it. Here's another really eye-opening statistic from CE Safety. 31% of fire doors are incorrectly installed from the outset. So we're not just seeing issues creeping over time. Nearly a third of all doors were faulty from day one. This highlights a very real and fundamental challenge. It's not enough just to buy a compliant fire door. It needs to be properly installed by people who know exactly what they're doing and have the details of that door recorded properly in a digital system where that history of the door can be pulled up and records easily maintained and kept in one place. It also highlights the importance of proper installation, clear guidance and rigorous checks from the outset to make sure we're not building future problems into our properties. So on that note, I am going to pull up our first poll, and you can see that, you should see that pop up now. And that poll is, how well does your your organisation understand and implement current fire safety regulations? And there's 3 options to choose from here. We have a strong understanding and are fully compliant. We understand the regulations, but face some challenges in implementation. We're unsure about the requirements or our level of compliance. So if you're all happy to add your votes, and we can take a look at some of the answers coming in. So I can see already from some of the voters that most of you understand the regulations, but do face some challenges on implementation, which isn't surprising given the stats that we've just seen. Some of you do say that you have a strong understanding and are fully compliant, but thankfully all of you on the call so far, no one's voted to say that you're unsure about requirements and level of compliance. That's good. But I think we'll probably all agree from some of the responses here that there are challenges on implementation. So hopefully what we run through today will address some of these issues or help you, get to a better place. So moving on, let's dig a bit deeper into the fire door compliance, which is a critical part of building safety that's often overlooked from most of us, but can save lives. We'll break this down into 4 key stages: standards, inspections, the audit process, and how often checks happen. So firstly, the key standards. All fire door compliance is based on building regulations and approved document B. The main standards to be aware of are listed in the slide, so you can see them here. I'm not going to read them all off. And these set the benchmarks for fire safety, performance, design, testing, and signage. Next, what exactly should we be inspecting? As part of the fire safety inspections, we should be looking at door conditions, any damage or unauthorized alterations, certification, so if the door must be correct and has the right rating label, frames and seals, that everything's intact, closers and hinges and they're working properly, gaps, so the gaps around the door, glass panels and that being fire rated and secure, and finally locks and signage, they need to be compliant and safe to use. Thirdly, what should the audit process itself look like? We start by identifying and inspecting fire doors from deployment. Any issues found should be clearly recorded with suggestions for repairs. Once fixes are made, doors should be re-inspected. It's also important to communicate with residents so they understand the purpose and importance of fire door safety. And lastly, the frequency. As we've heard from Regulation 10, that frequency has been upped in recent years. So where communal area doors now need to be checked every 3 months, flat entrance doors should be inspected at least once a year. And those regularity of checks and that periodically means that there's pressure on many asset owners to do those checks in a consistent way. So in summary, following the right standards, knowing what to look for and following a thorough audit process and sticking to regular inspection intervals is really essential. However, when fire door inspections are managed through a fragmented or inconsistent process, several serious challenges can arise, and they go far beyond just missing paperwork, as an example. Firstly, there's a risk of incomplete or inaccurate records. When inspection data is scattered across different systems or recorded inconsistently, it can create gaps. These gaps make it harder to track issues, ensure safety, or demonstrate compliance when it really matters most. Secondly, fragmented processes and data can cause compliance challenges and legal risks. Without structured, verified records, it becomes very difficult to prove compliance. This opens organisations up to legal exposure, financial penalties, and reputational damage, not to mention increased safety risks. Thirdly, fragmented processes can delay issue resolution and cause rising costs. Unstructured workflows can slow down decision-making, and when issues aren't flagged and addressed quickly, they can escalate, leading to increased repair costs and greater risk for residents. And finally, there's the increased administrative burden. Managing inspections manually or across disjointed systems is time-consuming and inefficient, especially when dealing with large or complex property portfolios. So ultimately, a fragmented approach to door inspections doesn't just make compliance harder, it makes buildings less safe and operations more expensive. So coming back to all of you on the call now, we have our second poll. And the question here is, what are your organisation's top challenges when it comes to fire door compliance? And here you can select all that apply. So some of the answers here are compliance and audit gaps, lack of digital tools and accountability, poor conditions and ownership, limited resources, inefficient processes, or we don't have any challenges. So if you can all vote now, you should see that poll pop up. And I can see, again, from some of the answers that compliance and audit gaps are some of the top challenges that we're seeing today across this group on the call today. Lack of digital tools and accountability. Limited processes is also top up there as well. So I think what we've heard from asset owners ourselves and some of our customers, they do experience some of that issues, and it seems to be that those of you on the call are probably in agreement with that. And actually, nobody has said that we don't have any challenges. So I think everybody probably has experienced some challenges along the way. So on that note, I'm now going to hand over to James, who will talk about the digital first approach. So thank you, James.
Thanks, Maria. So jumping in quickly to this section, what we're going to do is run through where Zutec's solutions can support in kind of getting past some of these issues. Notable that some of the bits that came out of the poll were around audit gaps, lack of digital tools. So it feels pretty salient to run into what a digital solution can do in order to support meeting the regulation around fire doors. So where we're coming from in this is kind of a bit of a 4-point list, as you can see on the slide here. So I think first and foremost, it is very much about building out a robust digital audit trail. We know from speaking with customers that there can be kind of myriad ways, be it in-house or engaging a third party to carry out these fire door inspections, resulting in challenges around maintaining a consistent thread of information through all of them, documentation being stored in different places and the like. So the idea of using a single system to build that digital audit trail means that everything is accurate and fully documented, as it says on the slide here. The other piece then is around standardizing inspections. So using a consistent standardized approach, whether it is within a single building or if you have a portfolio of buildings that you manage or own or look after, and ensuring that the approach that is carried out across each of them is replicable, so that when it comes to the overall managing of the fire door strategy, all of the information is gathered in a consistent way and can be acted on in a consistent way and managed either centrally or at a property level. So what we kind of position Zutec as in this is a source of truth. So it is a single system whereby all of that information can be captured, retained, audited, can be made accessible to any stakeholder who requires access to them, be that first or third party. And it gives really that kind of source of truth that you can rely on and be confident that it's there. And as I said, I mentioned, if you need to audit those records, these are verifiable records, verifiable both in the sense that they are collected and are stored in a single place, but all of the things around an audit trail of how you got to the point of having those digital records with things like photographic evidence and other features that we'll come onto in a minute. So what we're trying to do is solve very much for this problem or these challenges around maintaining compliance with the regulation and doing so through a digitally enabled approach, which our customers can own, make use of, and deploy across their buildings or portfolio of buildings. From a functionality point of view, so there's 5 pillars, I guess, around this solution. And look, ultimately, we'd recommend any solution that's used probably needs to have these as well. So first and foremost, how do we make it easy for people to actually use and make use of on the ground? So it is mobile enabled, all of the checklists and the like, and how the end users who are carrying out the inspections engage with it is through a mobile device. So elimination of need for capturing things on paperwork, creating things like PDF documents that then have to be stored or sent or at worst kind of printed out and copied. So making sure that there is that connection. That connects to a centralized cloud platform. So everything is aligned. It syncs into a single cloud-based platform that can then be reviewed and interrogated by key stakeholders. Back on the mobile point as well. So obviously, doors will have their own kind of reference codes or identifiers. To simplify that process as much as possible, the app and the kind of user journey is very much begins with the scanning of a QR code. So if you have a QR code on each and every of your fire doors, then it is extremely simple to jump into the inspections. No need to pull down a list of all of the various reference numbers and work out which door it is that you're actually looking at. I mentioned photographic evidence previously, so this is key for us in terms of building this solution. How do you demonstrate that something is or isn't compliant? Obviously, taking an image and either annotating or sharing it as part of the record is a key one. And then lastly, at that management level, obviously, all of this capture of data is useful and helps compliance. But if you can't look at it in an intelligible fashion at a high level and be able to drill down where you need to, then it is just a vast amount of data which sits in a repository somewhere. So this dashboard layer is obviously key when actually thinking about how you're going to use a digitally enabled tool to manage or support you in managing your fire door strategy. So with all of that said, we'll jump into a live demo. Now, due to the joys of using webinar software, I do apologize if anything goes wrong. I've practiced this a bunch of times beforehand, but you never know until you know. So we'll jump into a quick demo here, and I will attempt to make this as seamless as possible. Okay, good. Well, that looks like it's working. So that's the first barrier overcome. So once you log in, so this is our overall kind of risk area or risk part of the application that we're looking at. We are obviously going to go into the fire door audits part. So one of the things I talked about a second ago was that ease of access using a QR search. So yes, you can go in and search your register, but the simplest way is for us to jump in, click on the QR button. That happened incredibly quickly, but I scanned a QR code which I had on the screen. What that's then done is it's drilled down to this, in effect, imaginary door and has pulled all of the records associated with it. So you don't need to kind of endlessly filter through or search through for specific references. Jumping into this, so this then holds all of the existing audits that have been carried out for said door. So it's all kind of drilled down onto that. So you can look in and you can review any existing inspections. So I can go in and have a look at a completed one, and it will give me all the information. What I'm going to do first, though, is create a new inspection. So I know that I'm on the right site. Hold on 1 second. Let's just jump that back again. There we go. So I know that I'm at the right location. So I'm going to click the new inspection. So this pulls up with a form, and the form has all of the various information points that I need to capture. So there's a bunch of drop-down stuff. This all says required field. Using a QR code, this can be automatically set, so the end user doesn't have to kind of trawl through and input all of the things like level, location, door type, etc. That can all be stored within the platform, and then the QR code just references that directly. The user then, as they're going through and they're carrying out the inspection, has a selection of questions that they can answer. So this is all in line with what we'd expect to see in a classic inspection. This is all kind of customizable though as well. So if further questions need to be added, then they can be. So you simply go through. Appreciate this might be a bit small. Let's zoom in a little bit. So you can kind of go through. You can see the questions, answer yes, no, not applicable, etc. to them. Now, if I do encounter an issue, or alternatively, if I want to take a photograph to verify that this has been carried out correctly, I can raise an issue or raise an image against the question in question, I was going to say. So if I look at the ironmongery and I hit a no here, what I can then do is I can raise an issue against this. So this will then very quickly take me and prompt me to take a photo. You get a nice view of my desk. So my image has been taken. So this image then is now associated with that question within this kind of set of inspections. Again, a bunch of fields that I can drop down. So let's just plug some of these in. Again, a lot of this can be pre-populated, but this is just to kind of show you. So if it's related to the gaps and seals, I can set a priority against it. I can add some issue description within there. I can assign it to a responsible party, or who is the responsible party? Is it the property manager? I can assign it to who that management company is. And so all of this then creates my linked issue. So you can see here my question now, where I've put no against it, now has an issue associated with it, meaning that anybody coming in to review this can see exactly what the problem is. There will be a more detailed description than the ABC that I put in there, and they can see an image associated with it, and then they can kind of take the course for remedial action. So I'm not going to go through and check every single question. We'll just move on to the end of the journey here. So you then come to the sign-off point. So you can have multiple points of sign-off here. So if I'm acting as the inspector, I can plug in my email address. It knows who I am, so it'll pull my name through, and then I can just stick a pin in, which it doesn't like for some reason, or I can sign the box. It will then allow me to sign that off, and then I can submit that by saving it. And it will go against the, we'll ignore all that for now. I can submit that by saving it, and it will then go against the register with all of the various records, which can then be reviewed on the desktop. So we'll stop sharing. And we will now move on to the desktop version. So thus far, as a user, I've gone through, I've captured my information, I've taken an image associated with it, I've answered the questions accurately, and I've supplied photographic evidence and any supporting information. So you can imagine it's been carried out kind of writ large across all of the fire doors associated with a property, or even larger across all of the fire doors associated with a portfolio. What you want to be able to do is then interact with that information and make use of it and act upon it or report against it. So if I now jump into screen share here. So this is our desktop platform. So this is the kind of link, the cloud-based platform that we have, and you'll always start from the dashboard. So you have a big register of all the records that are input, which you can absolutely interact with, but for ease of use and to not just have to look at rows upon rows of data, it is always easier, we find, to use something like a dashboard, and you can drill progressively further down to get to various pieces of information that you want as you go through. So this is very much at a high level view. So these are the fire door audits carried out across my lovely portfolio of 2 properties here, and we can see the majority of them have been complete. Now, if I want to then jump in a little bit further detail, so I can see here Rosewood Court, for example, it's got some that are incomplete, and it will give me that kind of breakdown of how many have been completed versus a pending. I can go further and look at kind of various levels within the building. It's just allowing you to drill down and get to more actionable insights across either a property or portfolio. We can see when the inspections have been carried out over time. So For a high level read of information, this is useful. It's going to give you that kind of temperature check of what's happening across your fire door inspections, and highlight, where the volume of them that have been carried out over time and what else potentially is outstanding. Obviously, though, you're likely to want to go further than that. So we have a couple of views that allow you to get into more detail here. So the next is the wall chart view. So this view gives me my clear view across my estate of quarter by quarter, have the fire doors being carried, fire door inspections even being carried out. We have a very simplistic kind of either complete, or if it's red, it's incomplete. You can also have various statuses across here. So it could be complete and passed or accepted. It could be issues or mitigation required across them. And this can all be flashed up on this dashboard. So you can then dive into those. Again, filters here, so we don't have to look at the entire data set. I can drill down into a much smaller subset, and I can see here level 1 on Rosewood Court, got a fairly good set of completions here. If I then want to refer back to one of the forms in question, so the most recently completed ones, let's look at this one for this door. Very quickly can jump into it if my internet plays ball, and it will just pull up the form. So this is the form that I completed on the mobile phone, or the user completed on the mobile phone, has all of the information associated with it, even pulls through the QR for the door itself, all of the questions that have been answered. And I can see here that it's either NAs or yeses. There's a no here, and I can see if it has been signed off, who signed off on it. If you have a process whereby you need a second signature, that can also be included there. And I could even see the image that's been taken to verify. So pretty simple to be able to jump in, but very quickly, I can start from that large data set. And if there's a particular door or selection of doors that I want to look at, very easy to navigate to that, get me the information that I need, and even be able to pull up the form that was carried out. The last one of these that we're going to look at is then just the audits summaries. Let's just scrub these filters. So on the audit summary, this then allows you to kind of flip it a little bit. So if you're interested more in where everything's being passed and rejected, effectively, I want to look at a question level rather than a door level, right? So all of the previous ones were looking at a kind of property, drilling down to level to door. In this instance, if I want to know what are the most persistent issues, for example, that have been captured within a given property. So again, let's jump back to Rosewood on this. So we can see here, this is all of the individual audit data that's been captured. On the right-hand side, though, I've now got all of my questions, and I can see within these question sets, where are my kind of biggest sets of issues, so the big X's where they've not passed, for example, and I can look through all of the various questions that we ask amongst the form, and see totals for each of those, whether there's more issues in ironmongery, doors and frames, etc. So this just allows you to kind of get a little bit more insight. So rather than just going, okay, there's X amount of doors that have either passed or failed an inspection in a given building, actually what at a kind of larger level, what are the types of issues we're seeing? Are these things that are going to require mitigation? Do they require further action, etc.? And again, you can do this from this kind of centrally managed view that we have here through the dashboard. Okay, so that concludes the demo portion for now. Thanks for bringing the slides back up. And I will hand over to David, who's going to take us through his case study. Thank you, David.
Thanks, James. Hi again, everyone. My name is David Emuan. Just very briefly, I'm the MD and founder of Sculptra, a real estate-focused management consultancy. We specialize in simplifying complexity, optimizing processes, alongside technology re-engineering and alignment. This empowers making buying smarter, working easier, and service delivery exceptional. This approach can even be applied to something as exciting as fire doors, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today. So I'm going to take you through a tried and tested approach to implementing everything that James and Maria has talked about. We have a number of clients in this space. And the reason I'm here today is I'm currently working with Zootech, who was selected through a very stringent procurement process for one of my clients to go on this journey. We are technology agnostic, I must state, at Scoptra. But as I said, given the topics today, I was more than happy to come along and kind of give you a warts and all kind of conversation about going on this journey. So first thing I want to talk about is what were the drivers for embarking upon digitizing the fire door remediation amongst most customers. It comes as no surprise that with the recent regulation that's been talked about, what's key to a lot of clients we work with is the attention and risks and responsibilities that operators now need to have to make sure that they are compliant. And that just means avoiding jail terms, avoiding huge fines, some of which could be as much as 20K per building, or various other elements around that. Reputational damage. Those are the first things that really come up on the list as to why this needs to be done. Keep the CEOs out of jail. And then, of course, a raft of other things. Efficiencies always falls in there. Preparing for those audits, which I'll show you the types of things that that's covered by that, and all the other things you can see listed here. So you've really got to always start with the why, and sometimes that helps in creating a business case for the cost justifications as well as the resources that's going to be needed on those projects. Now, typically, the current as-is sort of state of affairs for a lot of clients going on this journey sort of looks like this. I mean, this is a very nice diagram, right? It looks very clear that first off, you've got the asset registration consideration. In other words, capturing all of your fire doors, updating your asset register, the labeling of doors. But what you'll notice in this particular picture is that each of these has different systems loaded with Excel spreadsheets. And that's part of the problem, right? What this picture also shows is that even if you do have that information and you want to start that physical survey, again, it's done in Excel. It's either done by a third party that then passes that on, PDF reports, etc. And then there's a question around document management. There are questions around email communications or where the sort of information can be found. So what this picture is looking to do is just kind of showcase that, look, there are various parties involved in this. Each has their own risk, as their own responsibilities. Different systems are used. And of course, for you to be able to get through this whole remediation of activities and making sure you're compliant in surfacing information where and when it's necessary on one platform or possibly integrated platforms, it really becomes a challenge. So the ideal future state model, if you like, a postcard from the future, just means that this is the state of affairs you're looking to. If you can do all of this in one platform, then great. But also what sits behind this is having the right governance in place, as well as roles and responsibilities as to who is doing what and how that information is shared. Sounds very simple, but let's just break that down a bit further. So often embarking upon these projects, we know that there are some key things that we need to stand up for success. And I'm just going to go and work through these three key areas. So starting with the governance and the roles, accountability, and those sort of things. So in this particular case, I think one of the things I've noticed with businesses that are really working fast to try and remain compliant is that as much as they know they need to get the tools like the Zootex out there, the bigger question is actually around capacity. Making sure that those people that are going to be involved in the project, whether it's the estate managers, asset directors, inspectors, whether they're in-house, outsourced, whether you're using management agents and companies and how they all work together, that really needs to be given a lot of thought up front rather than as a reactive way of moving forward in the project. So setting up that right structure, making sure you've got a sort of steering group that represents that, a sponsor that understands and owns the business case, why you're doing this, the justifications, and then of course the various teams you're going to have to work with. I mean, this is just one example where, as you can see, there's a raft of roles that need to be a part of this, and those people need to be either secured up front or backfilled, or really given a good indication of how much of their time is going to be needed for this. And then there's something to be said about having a vendor on board, like or partner, I prefer to call, like Zutec, but also people who have been through this before, the consultants that can sort of manage capturing those requirements, prioritizing what's important across the different businesses, and helping to just with that nomenclature when it comes to naming conventions. Because again, you're going to be learning some technical words from an application point of view versus the business world, real estate type of information, and how you just feed that back and forth through this project. I'll explain a little bit more. So really getting that solid governance set up to start with is important. Again, I'll just touch on the roles and responsibilities. You know, for example, one of our clients, Get Living, they have third parties. They've got Savills, you've got managing agents, management companies, third parties doing the actual surveys. So again, who has responsibility when it comes to doing the actual work, and depending on what type of work they're doing, all of that again really needs to be called out, and developing that sort of high-level RACI that, look, when it comes to the statutory fire door visual surveys, the task planning and coordination is done by this party. The implementation of the statutory visual surveys, you know, who's accountable, who needs to be informed, the review of those visual surveys and the reports, and the prioritization of the remediation work. Again, who does that? So all those elements or activities really needs to be fleshed out, because again, when it comes to configuring the solution, it's very important from a security perspective as to who sees or does or performs certain actions in the system. So that's the first approach. The second will be, in some cases, like you may decide to go for a procurement to actually, you know, look at other similar systems. What I'm just putting here is just sort of a 5-step approach. And I've just put an indication of months to give an example again of one in particular where we worked with a client to do a real solid discovery piece. And it wasn't just necessarily about the fire doors. We took the opportunity to look at beyond fire doors. It's not just fire door surveys you do. It could be asbestos. It could be accident management. It could be, and before you know it, started to lend itself into a wider CAFM solution. And then there's that bridge between, you know, health and safety and compliance, facility management, and so on. So, you know, we shook the can on all of that. And what we were looking at there is, okay, while the focus is on fire doors, let's make sure that this solution is scalable to slowly bring in all of the other data that currently either sits in other systems or Excel spreadsheets, and slowly build a roadmap that encompasses one database that can manage all of those different service lines. So the discovery was very intense, making sure that the requirements we captured were based on people's roles. And then surfacing all of that to make sure it's prioritized so we could use that to form part of the RFP that goes out to the vendors. So that's what we did. The procurement was just as thorough, and the next slide actually talks about how to procure, what sort of things you really need to think about when you're procuring these type of systems. But effectively, you want to do it in 2 formats. One is, it's a theoretical tick box exercise based on those role-based requirements that are prioritized into your musts, your shoulds, etc. What are the, you know, can your application do that? And that's a sort of a theoretical tick box response. But then it's also creating real life business user scenarios to actually get such vendors that make up the beauty parade to demonstrate their solutions to you. And then, you know, all that way you're slowly whittling it down to how well there is a match. And I'll talk to that on the next slide. The POC, proof of concept. Again, if you're able to, and this really depends on time, it also depends on the appetite. to actually decide whether you want to do a little bit of a proof of concept in some key area that might be a bit of a challenge because of either your uniqueness as a business or some challenges you've had in a particular area. And this just means setting up a deeper dive into some of those use scenarios and working with your partner to see what that looks like. The advantage of that is that it allows you to really get to understand the vendor. You get to work with some of those that actually will deliver the package, but also the vendor gets to really understand your unique business setups in those areas. So I would always recommend, if you can and you've got the time for it, do a proof of concept before you actually start the delivery. And then, of course, depending on the size of the portfolio, depending on the number of stakeholder groups, the delivery itself, I've just put 3 months here, but that is really dependent on a number of factors. But I think the main reason that I'm explaining here with the framework is that sometimes projects just start straight at delivery. And the disadvantage with that just means that not enough time has been given to really allow for the requirements to be finessed, or for the vendor to really understand where you're unique or some of those high-level challenges. So the more time you can spend up front just doing that work yourselves, or with the help of a consultant like us, then the better. It just means you go faster when you get to delivery, because pretty much if you've done a proof of concept, that's probably 50% of the project done. What you're then really focused on delivery is really just configuring and doing the testing, the user acceptance testing, before you then put it live, and then you're in the adoption piece. And I already kind of talked about this, that the procurement itself, in this example, you can see there's four stages before you get to your final results. But like most procurement areas, it's about, in this particular case, working with Zootech, Get Living, we went out to about 5 different vendors. And that was just putting together a high-level brief, expecting the responders to really demonstrate their market presence, their experience, their accounts and all that sort of thing. And then the bid itself, which is where, as I said, with all the requirements that were gathered at the start, again, role-based requirements, what the inspectors would like to see, prioritize the estate managers, all of the different roles that make up those typical business day in the life of user scenarios. What was the response as to how well their solution can deliver that, either out of the box, whether that requires some configuration, whether it's additional development, or actually it's on their roadmap or not on their roadmap at all. And it was quite surprising, the sort of responses we got back. And of course, when you compare that to your existing systems as well, you should have a flag in there that states whether it's existing functionality or it's a wish list that you don't have today, and all of that sort of stuff. All that intel really comes in useful. And then the third stage, was able to whittle down. Questions are still asked about, timeframes. And then this is when we call those last 2 vendors in to really do a real good demo based on scenarios we give them, as opposed to an overall sort of generic sales demonstration of the solution. But these were based on Get Living's own sort of requirements. And I must state, just to give you some background with Get Living in particular, they currently have over 6,000 units. They're a BTR organization, soon to rise up to 10,000 units by next year. So a lot of scale where we were looking at, a lot of systems already in place that we're looking at consolidating. So there were really solid questions that were based on the current day challenges that we needed to make sure Zootech will fit. And while doing that, you're always evaluating the supplier in terms of, as I said, their experience, how flexible they are in terms of their roadmap, how mature they are, how secure their platform is. Those sort of things are what you're looking at between the supplier as well as the solution itself as you're going through that experience. And at the end of that, as I said, of course, with all those ticks in place, in this particular case, we picked Zootech, but it's a very similar approach that we take across the board. So again, I think just to recap in terms of stages, the typical journey is really making sure you understand your current status quo. In other words, why are you doing this? Who are the different stakeholder groups within the organization that are looking at this? Do they fully understand some of those challenges, the Building Safety Act, the golden thread, the approach to be taken? And then this is really important, a postcard from the future. In other words, working on your outcomes, making sure everyone's clear on that, high level objectives, leading indicators that what we're doing is working, and then working backwards from those leading indicators. When I'm talking about leading indicators, I'm talking about things like a change being, in being able to generate your own reports from a centralized system, as an example, or a change of fire door assessors being able to upload assessments directly in our own system. And, when you're talking about those different stakeholder groups, from the operator, the mancos, and managing agents, again, able to utilize a consolidated asset register. Some of these things can't even, but if they're not being done in the world right now, then it's not really a question of benchmarking. It's about, let's set the system up so that we can start to benchmark once it comes into play. So that's really important, just making sure you understand the outcomes and working backwards. Obviously, having a phased plan is really ideal. And I think, James touched on that about, in terms of rollout, do you do it in blocks? Do you do it in groups? These are real big considerations you need to think about. We had one client who, while we were implementing a solution, they were actually still doing a tender to pick the qualified remedials, those that will do the surveys to collect the data. So in other words, then the project was more about, okay, first phase will be about setting up the application so that the asset register can actually be, extracted, exported into an Excel. And then it's working with that third party that they can go around and do all the fire door checks, not checks, but asset registry, and then pump that into Zootech. And then actually the remedial works, whether it quarterly or annually, then starts. That was the approach to be taken, and that was going to be done on a block by block or portfolio by portfolio basis. So incremental rather than a big bang. Risks and constraints is always a good one to know what risks you're up against. Typically in these projects, it's always down to capacity. As I said, never enough time is ever given. People's roles change during the projects. And just trying to keep that all going, the diary coordination, if you think about it, between probably 3 or 4 groups in some cases, where you have the operators and those that work within those teams, you have a management agent, you have the software vendor, and then you could have consultants. That's a lot to manage in terms of diary management and expectation on time. So that's why those timeframes I gave in the previous slide, they seemed a bit generous, but it was, most of that is around, it's not just about what the software can do and setting up time for workshops, for configuration and testing, but you also have to consider the time that's needed internally, because there'll be some discovered requirements as you go along. Things are changing. So you've got to build in room for internal conversations to be had, so that the next time you have a workshop with the software vendor, you're more prepared. You have answers and decisions that have been made. So that needs to be factored in. So the approach to those to success, those steps I've just previously talked about, with very clear stage gates in between a typical software development project, analysis, design, configure or build, test, and then implement. You've really got to have those stage gates and sign-offs in between each one, even for something as simple as fire doors. As I said, that was kind of what I was joking about at the start of my conversation, just saying, it's about simplifying complexity, optimizing those processes, making sure they're aligned, people understand them, and then getting the technology to match that. There's a fine art in doing that, and that applies to something as simple as fire door remediation. So I'm hoping that within that sort of space, it's kind of giving a brief overview, but I'll hand back over to you, Maria. Thanks everyone for your time.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. That was really insightful. So thank you for going through that. We did actually have a question in during that, and I think this is probably more for you, James, and if you're happy to pick it up quickly before we move on to the poll around, does the platform offer somewhere to store other vital information data in regards to servicing and maintenance, e.g. emergency light, dry risers, AOVs, etc.?
So yeah, thank you. simply put, yes. So after we've gone through this poll, a couple of slides just to talk through kind of broader applications of ZooTech, of which that falls under. So let's quickly run through the poll, and then I'll pick that up in more detail as some supporting information.
Great. So the next poll is now live. You can probably see that at the bottom of your screen. That should have popped up. I know some of you are answering the polls on the chat bot, but you can actually vote as well within the poll itself. And this question is, how do you manage fire risk assessments and inspections? So is that in-house with a trained team, so a competent person, qualified third-party inspectors, or external fire safety consultants? So for those that are on the call, if you could submit your votes now. And I can see already that most of you, 56%, are using external fire safety consultants, and some of you are using in-house trained teams or qualified third-party inspectors. So that's great to see, and thank you for your submissions there. Given time, I will now hand back to you, James, to continue. Thank you.
Thanks, Maria. I'll try and rattle through without making this seem too rushed. So thinking more broadly around kind of regulation and compliance and the applications of the ZooTech platform to support our customers in that. Fire door audits, I mentioned it in the chat in response to, I think, Christian's question. It is a solution that we've launched within the last year. Our, we call it bread and butter as a service provider, is very much around, software provider is very much around digital handover. So a lot of the work that we do is with contractors in collating all of those O&M documents and supporting information, and obviously that is a key part of achieving handover and PC. Where we've seen a bit of a sea change of late is in working more closely with asset owners so that they then specify us as a digital handover solution. So rather than it being left to the contractor to either complete the O&Ms themselves or to find their third party or preference to do it, which means that as an asset owner, PC, you get kind of inconsistent and varied information. Where we work directly with the asset owner and they specify us, what it means is that you're going to have consistent levels of data quality. So it's going to be consistent across any number of projects that you have. It will be complete, accurate, delivered through the same platform in the same format, meaning that everything that you're going into, you know what you're looking for, where you expect to find it. It reduces drastically that likelihood of any missing information. So whether you're using our standardized and tried and tested approach to O&Ms, or if you have specific requirements, either related to your own processes or related to the current regulatory environment, you can ensure that that is put in as part of your specification for your O&M manuals. And ultimately, this is very much about helping you meet regulatory compliance. So it's about completing, completing and maintaining that golden thread of information from build into operation. So yes, in answer to Lenny's question, we absolutely do play in that area of storing and making accessible handover information. So the way that we typically work with asset owners is they will specify handover at building completion as referenced. On completion, all that information is available through the ZooTech platform. We don't have time, or we won't be going through a demo of that, but similar interaction with dashboards and the like that you saw for the fire doors solution. And so once that's kind of an established process for new builds that are coming on stream, that's how we work. We also have the facility to add in-use buildings, so we can also process existing O&M or key building information to the ZooTech platform into that format that's been agreed with the asset owner as part of their specification, which allows, again, for that data to be structured and accessible, but also to facilitate gap analysis, so particularly for legacy buildings where, yes, there are O&M manuals. How comprehensive are they? How comprehensive is the supporting information? It's very difficult to work that out if it's just sat on a hard drive or on a SharePoint, or worst case on a bunch of kind of ring binders somewhere. We can very much support with digitizing and bringing consistency to that process. So that typically is the kind of foundational layer or foundational manner in which we work with asset owners. And then from there, should they wish, they'll then take on additional solutions, of which the fire door inspections is one. So these are the various pieces that we've got. I'm very conscious of time, so I'm actually going to skip past that, but we have a number of dashboards, particularly geared towards BSA and supporting customers in achieving a golden thread. But as we have 5 minutes left, I think we'll quickly move on to a poll and then hopefully some time for a couple of questions at the end. So back to you, Maria.
Great, thank you, James. Yes, so the last poll is now live. You should be able to see that in the poll section of the platform. And the poll question is, what technology areas are you planning to invest in over the next 3 years? I won't read everything out, but you can see the answers there. So please select all that apply. And from the questions that, the answers that are coming through, at the moment, I can see, just 1 second, technical issue. I can see that most of you are saying actually golden thread platforms are the ones that you're planning to invest in over the next kind of 3 years. Document management, CDE kind of coming up second, and then fire safety solutions and digital audit tools, although there's quite a kind of consistent response to all of these. So it looks like, you know, there is investment going into platforms. So thank you for sharing that with us. Given time, I will do a quick wrap up, and then we do have a couple of more questions that have come through, so we can just answer those with David and James. So just to kind of really wrap up very quickly, so as you can see from ZooTech, we kind of bring a lot to the table in terms of managing building information, inspections and compliance, and we offer more than just software in terms of our platform, service and knowledge, and working with consultants such as Scoptra. Obviously, the platform is kind of the foundation of our solutions and our approach. It's flexible, highly configurable, and designed to fit kind of seamlessly into your existing systems. And it features kind of industry-leading tools that you've heard about today from James and David. And these have been developed really in line with our customers. So we work very closely with customers to make sure we're bringing the right solutions to market. The second layer is kind of service, and we really like to see ourselves as an extension to your team and involved in every step of the process, really, from defining scope and implementation through to testing, training, adoption, monitoring, communication, everything. We want a hands-on partnership. And last but not least, our team does bring a deep sector knowledge. We've been around for 25 years. You know, there's expertise there. We have a strong track record in compliance and building information kind of management and data management. And that knowledge hopefully ensures that you get the right advice and the tailored approach to your needs. So, you know, you get the results and the outcomes that you want. So in short, with ZooTech, you're not just adopting a solution, you're kind of gaining a trusted partner, and we're helping you manage that golden thread across the platform, service and experience that you get. So kind of to wrap up with the last few minutes left, David, we did have a question for you, which I hoped you could kind of address first and foremost. And that is, how are you kind of helping? I know you talked a lot about how you're helping clients, but how are you helping clients kind of balance the quick wins with long-term transformation, particularly around kind of fire safety and building safety act compliance?
I think with regards to quick wins, some of that just comes through the initial alignment of services, roles and responsibilities. It was amazing when we were going through the discovery, for example, of the ZooTech project, just thrashing out who does what or who's supposed to do what, and getting that aligned for a RACI matrix was a very good quick win. Also, there's a lot of churn sometimes in terms of people that start new positions as these things open up. So they coming in fresh to this, just have a very clear understanding of who's responsible. As simple as that sounds, is actually a very good quick win. The other thing is data cleansing. You know, as you're going through these projects, one of the things you've got to do, and you should start doing now, is just looking at your data. You know, cleaning out old categories, extended long lists, and many things you can do yourselves. And just having someone focused on that just means that getting your data in a better state makes it easier when it comes to transferring across that data into the new system. But then if you're looking at the long term, that's pretty much back down to your original objectives. You know that, for example, if you're holding a lot of your maintenance or survey remediation information in one system, but perhaps you've got your certificates in Excel or something else, you could find yourself in a very messy situation where, it could be that, when you go and do your remediation on fire doors, it could even be a lift, you put it back into service, and then you find out that that lift is actually out of warranty, and the warranty information certificate is kept in a separate system. So again, if an accident happens, who's liable there? You're back to that old, well, why is that data not so accessible? So the mantra you would often find in those scenarios is about, one source of truth, a better data insight, and again, trying to understand your current KPIs, if there are any at all, SLAs, if there are none at all. Trying to get that all scoped out and ironed out just means that when you set the system up and configure, you can embed those SLAs as part of the, spring cleaning and setting up the new system.
Brilliant. Thank you, David. And then one final question for you before we wrap up, James. What does the onboarding and setup process look like, and how easy is it to train teams, especially those that are less comfortable with the kind of digital tools that we're showing?
Sure. So onboarding and setup, fairly straightforward, to be honest. So we have the question set already, which has been developed, so that can either be deployed or amended depending upon the customer's requirements. Similarly, all of the dashboards, they plug into the various forms and the field app itself. So all of that is kind of ready to go off the peg or can be customized. The kind of key pieces of information that we require from customers is everything related to the fire doors themselves, right? So all of the locations, reference numbers, what type of door they are, anything and everything pertaining to the things that are going to identify them and allow them to be inspected. So typically that's held, it might be kind of a big old Excel sheet or in a number of reports. So that information is required. And then just from a kind of customer logistical point of view, what's your preference? Do you want to have the QR code approach that was demonstrated? If so, if those aren't on the doors already, unfortunately they need to be put in place. If that's not the route you're going to go down, then obviously it's just a case of having the reference numbers, and oftentimes those are available on the doors themselves. So fairly straightforward. It can be more complex depending on how customized the customer wants it to be, but there is very much an off-the-peg solution.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. There aren't any final questions that have come through now, but if you do have questions following today's webinar, please do send them through and we can address them offline. I'd like to thank David and James for their time today and for their insightful session. So thank you guys for joining and being part of the webinar. I'd also like to thank everyone that has joined and heard all we had to say. So thank you, everybody. And I'd now like to kind of wrap this session up today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.